Yo, how are you doing, folks? Welcome to episode 56 of the Simpa Life Podcast with me, Simpa Carter. How are you doing, folks? Hope you've had a lovely week and you're all feeling very well. Not suffering too badly with this whole sad thing, this seasonal affective disorder that is seemingly kicking the crap out of me, my missus, and everybody in my close proximity. Well, let's hope that the bumper mushroom crop this year is going to help us out over the next couple of months as it gets a bit darker and dingier into winter. But anyway, on a lighter note, we have a wonderful guest that I've just spent the past half an hour having a wonderful conversation that you fine folks don't get to listen to, but you do get the next hour and a half or so of us chatting shit. Tonight's guest is an Irish campaigner for cannabis legalisation and drug decriminalisation, who recently ran for general election in Ireland, representing Cork North Central constituency. He's also the host of Martin's World Podcast, which aims to assist with the legalisation of cannabis in Ireland by uniting the cannabis community. It also aims to educate people about the efforts being made around the world to reduce the harms caused by drugs and drug prohibition. He is Martin Condon. How are you doing, brother?
Thanks very much, Simpa. I think that was probably one of the best introductions I've gotten to date. So I appreciate that.
I will take that because literally I think I put a comma in the wrong place, hence the weird pause in my notes. I was like, but yeah, we'll do it. We'll take it. So how are you keeping, man?
Excellent. No, very, very well now. And I really did enjoy that 30-minute conversation we had there. And it is a real bummer that people don't get to hear it. But I'm sure the next hour and a bit is going to be a treat for people anyway, as we fill you in on everything that's going on here in Ireland. And as we kind of come close to the end of this year, man, what a hell of a year we've had here in Ireland this year for the campaign for cannabis legalisation, if you will. Even at the moment, kind of currently going on is a conversation across the island because of a recent campaign we engaged in here where there was over 200 cannabis joints sent in the mail to all the politicians. So we've 160 TDs and we've a lot of other kind of politicians elected there. So myself and other campaigners in what was described as a joint campaign, we sent a load of cannabis joints in the mail to the politicians and to select media outlets as well. And the objective there was, firstly, I suppose, to get the conversation happening, to have the media outlets, the radios, and the politicians within our government as well talking about this issue around cannabis. And the second objective then was to hopefully, through the message that was contained in the letter, just to get into the minds of the prohibitionists and to help them, see light. Because I do believe that prohibitionists think that what they're supporting is the right thing to support in terms of achieving harm reduction. That they've maybe an ideology that the abstinence is the way to go. But I hope through the letter they've received and reading it, they'll see the errors in the way of that thinking and the real benefits of ending the prohibition and how regulation is the true pathway to harm reduction in regards to drugs in our society. So that was the overall objective. We've been incredibly successful in the first part, and only time will tell if the second part is successful.
Yeah, I mean, you touch on something there that I've been trying to keep an eye on, but it has been evolving so fast, is the evolution of the industry, the unifying of the community in Ireland has been a wonderful thing to see. I mean, I was lucky enough to attend Dublin 420 in 2018, I think it was, after Durham Police ceremoniously shut down an event that we had the previous month and basically made it very untenable for us to return to the area that we were going to use. And yeah, we congregated outside one of the main government buildings, and there was a real free party sort of atmosphere. There was guys with a van with the sound system, and there was a lot of people, but there wasn't very many organizations or collective communities. Whereas then this major, the major joint march for cannabis reform that took place over the summer, the scale of that was phenomenal. I must admit that was great to see that amount of unity across such diverse sectors within sort of cannabis community or industry.
Yeah, the Irish scene has definitely evolved over the last number of months for sure, with the introduction of groups like that, grassroots groups like I believe they're called Major Protest for Cannabis Reform. They've really stepped it up. We've had another group as well that's come to light recently through Reddit, Crown, which is like the Irish for tree. It's kind of like a little hidden message there, trees, if you know, you know. But they've also kind of taken out and setting off their own group as well. And you know, I'm working with a group over the last 12 months now, the Cannabis Activist Alliance, and we've got members from the major cannabis protest as part of our group. We're getting some of the members now from Crown over as well, and through doing that under the Cannabis Activist Alliance, we're going to unify all of the little groups from their own areas. Those groups can retain their own identities within there, but we'll all be under that one umbrella then, and we'll all be shouting the same message. We'll unify, in unifying, you know, harmonising our voices. We're louder, you know. If you've got a choir and they're all singing out of sync, you know, it's going to sound jumbled, it's going to sound horrible. But once we harmonise, you know, and that the message becomes loud and clear, and we're going to get the change we wanted. And I'm really excited for what next year is going to bring for the movement here in Ireland, because, as I said, this year was one hell of a year, and it's left me really optimistic about the future here. So, yeah.
Excellent. So this new Cannabis Activist Alliance,
yeah.
So does that represent, over here in the UK or in little old England, we currently have a real problem with false dichotomies. These artificial binaries that have been created between, say, the cultivation of low THC for agricultural or commercial interest and use. Then there's this creation of a prescribed cannabis sector. And then they've got obviously CBD for wellness and CBD health supplement, and sort of broken down in these different arguments and regulatory models. Is that something that the CAA have sort of thought about? Because it's one of the things that we found massively was an issue in the UK when we came to harmonise. People wanted so many different things, either for self-interest or because they were only informed from a certain position, or because they had a certain prejudice or preformed ideology.
No, very, very. I'm glad you brought that up, because we have a meeting every Tuesday night at 9 p.m. So last night it was actually only brought up. We were talking about our mission, our stated mission. You know, if anybody was to look at a constitution or whatever, what is this group's mission? And somebody brought up, you know, should we include our campaigning for legalisation? And I was just kind of like of the opinion, this is where we're going to run into problems, because you might want a different form of regulation than I might, you know. And what we have to do is we have to find where we can draw a line in the sand, you know, where we can all agree 100% with each other up to this point. And we you know, once we get to that point, that line in the sand, then look, we can have conversations about that. So that where we drew the line in the sand is, look, we can all agree that cannabis prohibition needs to end, that the criminalisation of people for growing cannabis, possession of cannabis, that needs to end. And we can all agree that when cannabis is legislated for and legalised, that there should be no criminal sanctions there for being in breach of any of the regulations that might be set in place. It should be in line with any of the other kind of sanctions. You know, if an off licence here in Ireland is found selling alcohol to an underage person, yeah, you got it on there, yeah?
Sorry, yeah, I've got a post, it would seem. 2 seconds, sorry.
Yeah, no panic.
The advantages of filming a podcast during the day.
Yes.
Do you know what it is? This is quite apt as well. This is going to be.
Pause. Yes. That was very important.
Always essentials. Yeah.
But just to get back where I was there on that, you know, in terms of the one thing we can all agree on is that decriminalisation shouldn't be a part of it. And where I was going was if an off licence here in Ireland was caught selling alcohol to an underage person, there isn't any real criminal sanctions there. The person behind the counter, they don't get a criminal conviction to their name, you know. Even the owner of the premises, they don't really get criminalised. What happens is they might get heavily fined, or the worst thing that could happen is they lose their licence to continue trading and having their business, but they don't go to prison. But when I look at any policies that have come around, like regulating and legislating for cannabis, like even the recent one that was done by Luke Flanagan, that is the most recent one here in Ireland, 2013, that sought to legalise cannabis for adults. If you were under 18 and you got caught with cannabis, you still receive a criminal sanction. You're still brought to courts. Whereas if you're a minor and you're caught with alcohol, you just get brought home to your mum and dad. The guards would bring you home to your mum and dad. You know, we caught Martin down the road there with a nagging a vodka or something. You know, have a few words with him there. But meanwhile, if they catch you with cannabis, it's up to the cell. You're getting strip searched up in the guard station. You're getting 101 questions. Where'd you buy this? Who gave it you? You know, it's absurd the way we want to mistreat cannabis, and how we want to treat other drugs and like alcohol and tobacco completely differently. So yeah, one thing we've agreed to do is draw that line in the sand that the group is going to actively bring people together with the one mission of bringing cannabis prohibition to an end. And what that means is there would be no criminal sanctions there. A secondary objective then, which we can all agree in, is the undoing of any criminal sanctions against a person. If you've got a criminal conviction there for cannabis in the past, that has to be undone. So those are the two main objectives that we've all agreed on, and that we're going to strive to work towards, and that we're not going to get bogged down on the finer details then as to when you achieve this legalization, decriminalization, how many plants should you be allowed to grow in your house, how much should you be allowed to walk around. Let's not even get into that. Let's just agree no criminal sanctions, and that's how we're trying to do that anyway. We're trying not to leave room there for fracturing to happen within it. There's a line in the sand. Everything else stays out of the picture until we get to this line in the sand, and we're going to strive to continue that there.
That's good to know. That is really good. I mean, one thing I found quite encouraging recently is the Republican representative from, see if I can pull this one on my ass, South Carolina. Can't think of her name off the top of my head. She's just basically, there's a leak come out in Marijuana Moment of a Republican-backed bill in America that basically speaks to exactly what you've just stated, that their priorities would be, number one, be states' rights, so allowing each individual state to follow whatever legal term or model that it wished. The other would be a form of ubiquitous federal decriminalization across the board, and the other would then be this form of expungement. And it's interesting that the language that was used within the document is of a descheduling of cannabis. This is something I've been pushing for the past year or so recently. I used to be of the ilk and group of re-legalize, because under my interpretation of what I understood to be the definitions of the terms, we're not asking something that has never been legal to be legalized. Legalized, as far as I understand it, is to create a restrictive models in which there are still punitive actions and results, consequences for breaking those regulations. Decriminalization, on the other hand, whether it be de facto or de jure, so through law or through a lack of enforcement, still creates massive gray areas for abuse and for lack of regulation for, instead of restriction of the market, but the betterment of it for improvement of quality, of service, of access. And so, yeah, I think this whole thing of descheduling works really well, because this Republican model, basically they're saying we want to just move it out of the scheduling of the drugs, leave narcotics as a system with the Misuse of Drugs Act. I disagree with that, but take it for a minute. We move cannabis away from that. It would then fall into the same regulatory framework as tobacco or alcohol, which, as we say at the minute, I mean, Ireland, same with the UK, has a massive problem with, what do they call them? Problematic consumers, I think is the politest way we say this. And the compounding effect of this on the UK economy is somewhere in the region of 21 to 25 billion a year in terms of the impact and cost of alcohol consumption. Obviously, they make quite a large part of this back to revenue and whatever else, but then we allow that system to exist. Whereas if we were to push alcohol, tobacco into the Misuse of Drugs Acts, it would screw everything up. So the logical rationale is that drugs would come out one by one of the Misuse of Drugs Act into a regulated system. So I think, that standardization of a terminology, not just in Ireland, not just in America, but in the UK, across the board of campaigners going, actually, we want cannabis deschedulized. We can figure out the decriminalized, legalized debate later, because that feels like, again, one of these false dichotomies that while we're debating this over here, they're building international corporations. They're already in lobbyist firms and groups, helping legal teams define the models and the terminology and the wording of legislation, while we're still on the grounds trying to point at the same thing and tell what color it is. You know what I mean? Yeah,
no, that's right. No, it is so true. We get bogged down in this. We waste so much energy, time, and our own resources getting bogged down in these things when we not needing to do it, because while we're doing this, as you said, like that there is these big empires being built around this. There is these outside interests coming in, looking at the fact that cannabis hasn't been legislated for here, and it's in their interest to keep it that way for a bit longer. And I think that the Republican senator was Nancy Mace was her name. But yeah, that's a great way to go. And something we kind of touched off of there earlier was the idea of decriminalization. I thought we were talking about it a little bit beforehand. But I would be of the opinion that having like this window and opportunity almost of maybe 5 to 10 years where you would completely decriminalize like the cannabis, like in all aspects. But you would allow then for, say, people like myself and yourself to set up these social club models where it's like a not-for-profit basis where you get rewarded, you know, paid for your time that you put into your club, and to the people who would come in and contribute their time to the club too, they would also get rewarded for that. But the motive isn't profit. The motive is to produce high quality cannabis, provide a safe, functional space for our community to come and socialize, because that's really needed. And if we were to give ourselves like that 5 to 10 year window of to establish this, then that would alleviate, you know, and it wouldn't eliminate, but it would alleviate the risk of, you know, the likes of Marlboro coming in and just literally just buying up the whole cannabis scene like at a click of a finger, because they've got the money to do it. We don't as grassroots activists, but what we do have is, you know, is each other, the community. And if we're given time, you know, to nourish that and to grow, you know, like a little cannabis plant, a seed, it needs just the time to grow and to blossom. And I would believe that if we were given that window of opportunity, you know, 5 to 10 years, and keep it strictly not for profit, you know, I don't want to see cannabis billboards on every bloody sidewalk. You know, I don't want to be at the bus stop like I currently see Jameson and Jack Daniels at the bus stop, you know, where kids bloody wait for the bus too, you know. I don't want to see campaigns like that for cannabis. Cannabis is great in its own right. You know, if you want to use cannabis, you know, you're going to know you want to use cannabis. You don't need some billboard to advertise that to you. That's only at the interest of these big corporations, these big brands. You know, we don't need that. It needs to be community driven. If you want to go get cannabis, you want to get it from your local community. You don't want to be buying the Budweiser of cannabis, but that's not really produced with love and, you know, care. That like some of the craft beers there. I really like the craft beer industry. I'm not a big drinker, but I'll have a craft beer from time to time. I enjoy that, you know, because I know somebody's put a bit of love into that. Like there's a craft there that's an art for somebody, and I like that.
Yeah, it's exactly. It's done for passion, not for profit. So the difference between that microbrewery and I'm not even going to try and pronounce it. I've just seen the word flash in my head, but who owns Budweiser, the German conglomerate that owns it, they have invested billions already into this. They're already here. And you mentioned tobacco. It's quite an interesting one. So the US and Canadian stock markets, the cannabis stocks have gone a bit batshit recently. Part of it is down to what we were just discussing before, Nancy Mace's bill, or the leak of this, the first draft. And part of it is down to, is it Altria? I think the London-based tobacco firm, the latest one to step in. So they bought, was it 45% of one of Canada's biggest companies that I can't pull the name out of my ass right now. And they with a deal to basically take the other 55. They paid $1.9 billion for this deal with this retainer, and they're looking to potentially step onto this. So the fact that Canopy as well have bought in a few of these sweetheart deals, they took on Warner Brands recently for $250 odd million, basically on the promise that if it goes, THC becomes federally permitted in the US, that they get to take first dibs and buy out the company. So there's all these big moves, as we were saying, as these big fish seeks to eat the big fish until there's 2 or 3 of them left. On the flip side of it is the opportunity that we have exactly if they're allowed to proliferate and organize and create, and currently in London, for example, float 50 to 60 million pounds on the London Stock Exchange for these so-called medical or prescribed cannabis companies, then we should be allowed to create these community enterprises. I agree, yes and no, to the idea of not-for-profit. I think controlled profit, yes, but the idea of, say, limiting profit is an idea of keeping them as niche markets, I don't think it's necessary. They should grow with the free market principles. As much as I disagree with them, let's take them as an abstract for this right now, to then supply and demand the consumers. So at the minute, we're seeing companies like MedMen, for example, arrive on the scene, pump billions into it, fall flat on their ass. And if it wasn't for someone like, Tilray came and bought like 25% of their debt share, again, just as a backdoor into the American industry, should things go, they'd go under. Yet on the other side of it, you've got mom and pop industries that started with one dispensary in Colorado that are now popping up all over the place. They're not quite taking on Curaleaf or anybody like that that's in 23, 24 odd states, but they're building these corporations, these entities that are then capable of supporting hundreds, thousands of jobs. And then that money is pumped back into those economies. They're not capitalist interested individuals, but they're operating within that system. And I think we should be given the opportunity to use our passion, our knowledge, and our ethics within that system, because we could create a lot of profit that we wouldn't just sit on. You or I, if we suddenly became millionaires from opening cannabis businesses, wouldn't chuck it all in the Caymans. I don't know about you, but I would then be rallying against government. I'd be lobbying. I'd be setting up firms and businesses, social justice.
Exactly what I would envision. Yeah.
So I think we need that wealth. And if we limit ourselves by going, oh, we'll just sit in the corner and 10 of us will grow our own, and like, no, because they're going to build that monolith anyway. And
well, not for profit doesn't mean you can't generate a revenue or an income stream or anything like that. It just means that it's not going to be investor driven or anything like that. It's any money that's generated by this movement, this community. It stays within the community. It's used for what the community desires, which might be improvement to social spaces, or as you quite rightly said, activism, lobbying the government. That's really what we need money for here.
Do you guys have CICs in Ireland, community interest corporations?
Not that I know of anyway. That wouldn't be something that would be...
something that's sort of a concept that is coming about in businesses, then corporations that are limited into their sort of mission statement, as it were. So that you could use community CICs, these community interest companies, as a model in the UK, for example, then set up cannabis businesses where the profits are then ring-fenced. So then they would go into certain pools, they would go into funding certain things. Obviously, you would then pay your various tax at the different rates for whatever commodities and services, but you would deliberately then ring-fence the top of the profit for whatever revenue stream you chose. And so I think that using something maybe adaptive from that with something similar to the Barcelona social club model, with a lot of what the body of the UK CSE was trying to achieve, I think really could move that model forward, where it's then, if the community could own a stake in the company, rather than it being into investors that just want to pump and dump, they want that money in, they want it out, and they want to see those returns. It's people that would then set up and own, say, the cannabis club in the local mining village up here in the north. Mm-hmm. The people that attend it own it. They then get a vote in what happens with it in terms of what then they supply. So if then the local community, rather than just going, oh, well, Stardogg's the next hype, so let's get all this in and replace all of our top shelf. No, 50% of our consumers like haze, so we're getting haze in, you know what I mean? And I think that if we can figure out the compromise between these sort of models, then we can get there. I agree. It's just that I know that obviously not for profit doesn't mean no profit. I just mean that to some people it becomes almost like a dirty word, and it would keep certain people away. Whereas I think that we almost need some of those, not quite the Patrick Batemans, but those swanky motherfuckers in suits. I think that if they could actually know what we know and see what we see, I don't think a lot of these people are ignorant through choice. I think they've not understood the culture properly. They've maybe come to cannabis in their later years and then suddenly go, oh, and it's novel and new, and they've only ever seen this surface industry that's been created post-legalization wave that's rippling out of America. They've not really understood the legacy of racism, of classism, the fascist fucking enforcement of prohibition for 50 odd years. They don't quite get it. And I think that the more we can marry these worlds together through things like these unifying campaigns in Ireland, which I wish there was more of around the world, we can have these conversations and I think find, as you said, that minimum line. And that minimum line, I think for everybody, if they're in their right minds and have the right intention, is the end, as you say, the end of criminalization.
Yeah, no, definitely. Yeah, and I would definitely kind of have to say that, like, well, there is good people out there, and I do see the benefit of having these kind of capitalist-minded people coming in and what they could offer. I just can't, even with the recent stuff in the CBD, I've seen some people come and they're like CBD this, CBD that, but you mentioned cannabis to them and they're like, oh, geez, don't mention that C word to me at all. I don't want to talk about that thing. Talk about CBD. Like who was it that there was a very famous as like a jockey's wife, I can't recall her name there, she was in the media there in the recent months. She was cribbing because the bank wouldn't deal with her because she was selling CBD, and she was like, but my CBD is not even from the cannabis plant, it doesn't even come from that place. She grows her CBD using fucking, I don't know, was it yeast or something like that in a lab. And she
biosynthesis.
Yeah, the biosynthesis of CBD, and that's what she was doing, making all these beauty products and all of this stuff. Like, but it was like she got a taste of the world of prohibition, and she didn't like it. And she was on like Ireland, fucking all of the different shows here, cribbing about it. It was great, you know. It was good to have that on there. But at the same time, you're just kind of looking at this person, you're just like, this lady, like, she just sees money. That's all. Like, that's the only thing. She's like, oh, I care about CBD. She was like saying that she was actually inspired by Vera Toomey. But it's like, lady, if you actually even knew a tiniest shred of what Veritomi had to go through because of like the stigma that she continued to fucking perpetuate by not even wanting to have CBD from the plant. Like, it's like, no, you have not been inspired by Vera. You've been seeing the money signs because of Vera, possibly. You know, you see, there's a lot of people interested in this. Look at the attention that Vera gets. You know, she puts up a post on Twitter there or something like that. Everybody, you know, hits that like button. She gets great attention. So then there's other people just wants to jump off the back of that and try to cash in. And that just really boils my blood. That just really infuriates me, because at the same time, while all of these people are cashing in, we've got people rotting away inside in prisons. We've got kids growing up without, most of the times without fathers, because by and large it is males who get criminalised because of the selling of cannabis and get locked up. So, you know, while all these people are floating their businesses in the London Stock Exchange in the New York thing, you know, there's literally a father somewhere out there right now, many of them, and a kid out there growing up with, you know, without that loving father there. And, you know, just the very fact that they grew cannabis or they sold cannabis or they possessed cannabis, that in no way makes them a bad father. And to rob a child of that, man, sad. You know, and I have 3 kids myself, so that's something that really is close to home here, because that's something I face here potentially, and I have been on the receiving end of that. I've spent bloody 5 days in prison here. I was supposed to spend 2 months because I just refused to pay any fines that were given me in court. I was refusing to show up in court, in fact. I just stopped showing up. I was on the run for 3 years. They were looking for me. They knocked at my door here a few times, and I answered, and they were like, "Oh, is Martin Condon here?" And I was like, no, he's not here at all. And who are you? I'm Dylan Condon. This was my brother. And they're like, "Oh yeah, no bother at all." And they just go ahead. It's like, it's like a great effort, lads. You know, it's like money well spent there by our government as well, because there was 2 cops, there was a squad car. You know, that's all resources. That's taxpayers' money. That's 2 cops who aren't out there actively looking for the rapist, the murderer, you know, the person who just broke into your granny's gaff and knocked her to the floor. And, you know, this really infuriates me. So I just take all of this, rather than getting mad, getting angry, I just put it in there. It's just like a little furnace that burns inside. It's just the fuel that keeps me motivated. So yeah, we'll keep on pushing for this, because we need to get the change, and the change is definitely coming.
Yeah, for sure. And no, I get what you're saying, and that was entirely my position. I suppose when I first started this, very anarchistic and just almost, fuck it, let's burn it to the ground. So full of anger and resentment towards the system, because I'd always known a certain truth. But then the more I became active and the more I gravitated towards other people in a similar sort of orbit, you know, the people that put their head above the parapet and that choose to spend their free time researching and learning and trying to just, for their own sanity, try and find an answer to this eternal question of what the fuck is going on with all of this. And it is, over the past few years, I've kind of recognized that, unfortunately, without great cataclysm, be it some form of climate change, some form of global war, or great sort of environmental, what do they call them, like earthquakes and stuff, natural event,
disaster.
Then I don't think modern capitalism, neoliberalistic capitalism, is going to end anytime soon. But I do think that there are ways to infiltrate these systems. And I think that we've already seen this here in the UK, for example, over the past 3-4 years. And Parliament went from being, no, screw cannabis is the worst thing in the world, to then in the late 90s kind of getting in the back door a little bit with GW, and then helping them sort of change and massage laws. And then over the past 4 or 5 years, ended up with several of front bench MPs directly or indirectly involved in investments that are then going to be determined by the fucking legislations that they'll ultimately write. So we've ended up with this ultimately corrupted system. And it seems that it's really difficult for us to figure out how to do anything. So again, we have the unifying on one side of it, but unless we in some way penetrate into that monolith, that monoculture, they're not going to have these free radical ideas in there to then go, oh shit, yeah, they're right. What about this? And it only takes 1 or 2 of us to break that seal. But I think what is happening too often is we live under a finite system where we're told that everything is limited and that the only thing you need is money. As long as you've got money, you'll be cool. And they've created this fear cycle within us that then as soon as they offer the carrot of here's enough money to actually eat well, live well, and not have to worry about your bills, that is a fucking hard carrot to turn down. And I think that a lot of people that then break that shell, they lose that that gusto, they lose that fury inside of them because you get comfortable. And I can't say that I wouldn't. And that's kind of what worries me about this. Do you know what I mean? This is why I've created the platform the way I have and the way I do the activism I do, is that I don't want to wear the suit and to have to end up earning the money and end up in those positions, because I don't know that I wouldn't lose touch with the reason I'm here. And I'm here for the people that are outside my window currently. I mean, that's the third most impoverished region in Northern Europe. That's one of the worst streets within that region. You know what I mean? These people are getting fucked left, right, and center. Yet they don't know how to grow weed. Most of the estates around here are ran on their drug economies. You know what I mean? And I want them to have their position within this.
Yeah. And
so it's frustrating, because then it's ultimately, to get them represented, we need to get to that level. But then to get that level, there's this apathy, this mire, this that gets on you. You know what I mean? This tackiness.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a fierce barrier to break there, but there definitely is a lot of people within those communities that you just kind of talked about there that are full of potential, and they never realize that potential because they might put it into something which ends up getting them criminalized. Like, I've seen some guys and they'll tell you that they're thick as shit, like, you know, they don't know nothing. But meanwhile, like, they're great at marketing. Like, they're fucking selling weed there to bait the band. I'm just kind of like, you know yourself. I know, in fairness, like, cannabis sells itself and all of that. But I'm looking at some of the plugs that are there on the likes of Instagram and Snapchat and stuff like that. And these guys got some skills there, like that. If they're in the likes of the local car shop or something like that, they'll be coming up with some really cool, creative ads. You know, that these people would actually potentially have a career in marketing, on the marketing side of things. But they don't see that. They only see themselves as, oh, no, I'm just a low-life criminal drug dealer. I have no skills. There's no skills in this. There's no transferable skills from what I'm doing as a criminal to the real world. But in actual fact, there's loads. There's like accounting. Like, did these guys have to be like, right, I'm buying in a key for this much. I have to sell an ounce for this much in order to make this much profit. Like, did these guys are fucking doing maths that they don't realize? These are transferable skills over into the real world businesses and stuff like that. And we portray them in the media as being like a drag in society, but the only real drag in society is this fucking failed prohibition that we continue to enforce. And we're robbing people of realizing the fullest of their potentials. You know, you're seeing people out there, you know, and I know one or two people, and they're artists. But they were getting picked on then as well, because like they were dressed like artists, you know, they would have like kind of baggier clothes, that they might go from the retro shop, you know, and they might have certain colours, make them look, be labelled as what might be seen as a hippie. And then they get picked on, and like they're not able to really realise to fulfil their true potential then, because of this criminalisation. I know one or two of them that I'm thinking of, they gave up cannabis. They just stopped having it. It was just too much trouble, and they were getting too picked on, and they were just like, no, it's just not for me. And these people then again, I just have to wonder what they're being robbed of then, because it's not a decision they're making because of anything negative that was happening as a result of the consumption of the substances they were consuming. It was solely because of a bully. That's all it is. It's like you come to the playground with a green top, and there's a bully on the playground and he doesn't like it. You've a green top there, and you come the next day and you're not wearing your green top, you know, but you felt, no, that was you. You were happy in your green top, you know, you just robbed it. And that's what I see the government, the authorities doing to people, and how they interdict their fucking, their views. They're effectively, like, if you look up the definition of terrorists, that's effectively what the government, the authorities are doing. They're terrorizing people into submission to conform to their ways of living, of their ways of believing, their religion of sorts, you know, abstinence, you know, it's a form of religion for these people. Yeah. And that's what they're effectively doing. And that's kind of what I see our authorities, and that's what I see our court system. They're just like state-sponsored terrorism on our citizens. And I'm, for one, I'm not going to stand for that, and I'm going to stand up against that, and I'll continue to do that. Look forward to my next day in court.
They are the indoctrination arm of the system. They are the status quo police. You raised an interesting point that I just kind of put a pin in my mind a couple of minutes ago. There is an interesting sort of crossover with the previous conversation that we were having. So your average drug dealer that is then depicted in the media is ironically the same person that's then capitalizing on the CBD industry that doesn't want to talk about cannabis. It's the same mindset. It's the same kind of personality type would do it. The only difference is they decided to break the law. Mm-hmm. So they are a danger. They are profit driven. It all results. Doesn't matter who gets harmed or what corners get cut. You know what I mean? Doesn't matter if we get caught because the ends justify the means. Versus then your average local dealer, which I mean, there are guys around here that literally, when they sell a 20 bag, that puts a meal on the dinner table for their kids that night. You know, when they go and they bulk buy an ounce off somebody, that puts the electric on for them. That keeps the gas on. You know what I mean? When they have that money, it goes into the corner shop. You know, they go to the chippy, they spend it, and it flows through that economy. Whereas then that capitalist-minded dealer, that vicious person that will use violence, will use whatever else, that isn't a member of the community, but is there to exploit them, is the same, I would argue, as that neoliberalistic vulture capitalist. So they've come into a new community going, what is the commodity that we can exploit? How can we leverage that against the community? And what can we extrapolate from them?
Yeah, and those people are enabled by the fact of prohibition. You know, if the community was able to cater for itself, then that person, it would be very difficult for them to go in and break that. Then they would have to be achieving all of what that other service within the community that's delivering that commodity is doing, you know, which would be customer focused, quality driven, and all of these things. They would have to be ticking those boxes too, or otherwise they would have to have it incredibly much cheaper in order to kind of break that. But again, it wouldn't work at all. And as well, you know, with the kind of the commodity selling and stuff like that. If we were to look at that, like these kind of these people who would like sell to your kid and stuff, they have no morals. I would argue, you know, that there's probably people out there operating businesses, you know, where they sell liquor at the moment, beer and stuff like that, who, if there was no rules and regulations there, they would have no problem with a 14-year-old sitting at the bar counter and pulling a pint from, you know what I mean? So I would definitely say that the regulation works and that it's good that we have regulations there to help guide people's things, because some people, as you say, like if something puts bread and butter on your table, sometimes, you know, you might not make the best decisions because you might feel like your next meal is relying on that. So it's important that we do have protections in place to kind of make sure that the risks like that don't happen. You know, it's important that we don't have 14, 15-year-olds sitting down at a bar stool having a pint. And I would argue that if there wasn't a rule there that says you couldn't do that, it would be happening.
It's interesting. So what is the alcohol consumption laws in Ireland? Because in the UK, a 5-year-old can consume alcohol in home or on a licensed premises as long as they don't buy it.
Yeah, we have something similar. I don't know about consuming on a licensed premises now, but we definitely have it in our legislation here that if you as a parent are consenting and like watching your kid, they can drink away to their heart's content at home. You know, they just have to be monitored and taken care of. You know, but I don't think they can do it on a licensed premises. I think there is like. That is there. And as I say, I think that's good.
Yeah, I think the clause is something along with private function. I broke it down in a blog a while ago.
Yeah, so this comes down again to respecting the privacy. So like there's a line which was drawn by the government. This is like how far can they intervene and dictate what you do in your life and how you raise your kids? And whenever they were legislating for alcohol at the time, well, there was obviously someone there kind of saying, well, when my fucking Mary and Johnny is 15, I want them to be able to sit down and have a pint with me at home. Because, you know, and too right, I see a benefit to that. Like if your Mary or Johnny like is, you know, turning of that age where they're getting curious, man, I would think yes, by all means, like have them sit down and consume it with and hopefully an educated adult, being, you know, their parent or their uncle or something like that, and they can consume it safely and learn then how these substances are consumed in a responsible manner, can be enjoyed safely. And the potential there, you know, for abuse then, because I know like my mom and dad, my uncles, you know, I've seen them getting fairly drunk in the past. So, you know, that the potential is always there. But yeah, I definitely think that having an allowance there to facilitate, you know, just to accommodate for people as they come of age to consume with adults, I think that's perfectly fine. I think that's great.
Yeah. It's, if you think about it, it sets the culture. And I think this is the main thing. So it's something that Johann Hari alludes to in the book Chasing the Scream. And sort of talking about it's not just about consuming the drug, it's the environment in which you consume it. Yeah. So therefore, if you then form familiarity, if you then form other positive associations to the consumption of a substance with the culture and community that you have, but you have a strong link to that community in the absence of that drug, then you can take or leave that drug. But if that drug is the linchpin is what is contingent on you accessing that culture, that acceptance, the familiarity of friends, of kinship, of even if you are literally shooting up in a house with 5 or 6 strangers, there is a certain level of not necessarily respect, of understanding that you have to trust each other to a certain degree, because you're about to make each other vulnerable. You're often sharing limited supplies. You all have the same common enemy at that point. You know, you're often sharing traumas, if not actually sharing them. You are in some way protecting each other from them. Do you know what I mean? And you create that culture. And I think that if you then install that at home, which is what they seek to do with alcohol most of all, and it's weird that in states that have now legalized cannabis as well, we've seen the same mechanism, that where you're allowed to consume it at home, people then kind of don't want to consume alcohol as much because it's desensitized, and it's like desensual. It's not as sensationalist. Do you know what I mean? You're watching your dad sit there and nick 5 beers, and yeah, you may go off and you have the big party or whatever, and you'll do that because of, again, the culture that you're consuming it with, but you're not necessarily then going to develop a relationship of going home every night and drinking your 12 cans. Mm-hmm. And I think that is what we need to talk about with cannabis, is actually youth exposure is not necessarily a bad thing. As I spoke to you about earlier, I think before we started recording, I started consuming cannabis when like 14, 15. So there is this hypocrisy whistle that goes off in my head every time I'm thinking, oh, well, they shouldn't, but, and it's hard to then rationalize in my own mind as to what was going on, because I wasn't going to listen to an adult at that age anyway. You know, if a dealer then didn't sell it to us, we just sent somebody who was older to go and buy it. You found a way to circumnavigate that system, in the same way now that porn on the internet and age verification, it's not really a thing in the same way at all. So we can either create these artificial restrictions that placate a false moralizing by a certain subsection of society, or we can kind of have that difficult conversation and go, well, actually, first exposure towards a sexual conversation, a religious conversation, and exposure to drugs should be in the home. Because if done right, you will have such a familial and trusting relationship with your parental units there, I keep saying that, your parents, that you will be able to have that discourse with them and in a safe environment, discuss things you wouldn't otherwise. So you remove peer pressure, you remove ignorance, you remove then fucking urban myths, the bullshit that some people end up arising to through high school, and then end up exposed to drugs with these warped ideas of how they should consume, or harm reduction techniques that actually increase harm, you know?
I have a daughter who's 14 and last year I recall her messaging me from school. She had her phone with her in school, and she was sending messages, but they were getting drug education and they were talking about cannabis. And she was sending me messages like, does cannabis do this? Dad, you never said that cannabis does this. Like, and they were like, oh yeah, cannabis causes you to hallucinate. It causes heart attacks. It causes psychosis. And she was like sending me these things. And I was just kind of like, you know, they're not being completely honest with you there. There's like really, it's kind of like saying, you know, if you're going to get in a car, you're going to die, you know, like, because like there's a small proportion of people who get into car crashes and die. It's like such a small minority. It's like, why, when we talk about cannabis, it's like, why can't do kids have a proper honest conversation? It's like with alcohol, they can see how alcohol is enjoyed, and they can see how it's consumed responsibly. It's fine to bring your kids to a pub on a Sunday, but with drugs, there's no avenue to see that. And all you ever hear about is the harms. And as you kind of quite rightly said, a lot of the times the only education we get, it's from our peers. And this is not always the best education to get. Now, thank God I was lucky when I was growing up, and I found erowid.org. I don't know, you probably are familiar with that. I got a lot of good education from there. I got to learn about like dose response relationships, you know, the importance of knowing your dose and testing your drugs, the contaminants that were out there, you know, and that was great. But when I was on the street, when I was out with the boys, like there was none of that. It's like, do you want a pill? Do you know? And so it's like, you know, and like, I can remember taking pills with the lads and having like 2 bottles of water, box of fags, and a packet of chewing-gums. And the boys were getting slabs of beer and stuff. And I was like, lads, this is going to dehydrate your body. It's not good. You're going to be regretting this tomorrow, because, you know, the combination of the ecstasy, the MDMA, and the alcohol, like MDMA dehydrates you, it makes you like want to drink that bit more. Alcohol, it's a dehydrant, like, and harm reduction. They were like, no. Yeah. And they'll be waking up the next day like chewed lips off them, like, and yeah. But harm reduction should always be center focus, but also, you know, not be the primary focus. It's like you can enjoy these things too, guys. It's always safer not to do them. Always safer not to do them. But if you are going to do them, if you're one of these curious people, if you'd like to, I know many people, and they've managed to keep their pledge that they make here when you're kind of making your confirmation here in Ireland. We take a pledge, I think it's called. I think that's what it's called. But you pledge to abstain from drugs and alcohol until you're 18. You do this as part of your confirmation through the church here. But there's many people, like, they're just like, yeah, it's like, alcohol's not for them. It doesn't interest them. Drugs probably don't interest them. Just like for some people out there, like soccer is of no interest to them, you know, fucking music is of no interest to them, like, whatever kind of monster that person is. But, you know.
I get you. And it's interesting. I had Connor man on last episode. And we basically spent 2 hours talking about physics and all sorts. We just did not even talk about weed. Literally got 2 hours in and we're like, shit, we both host Cannabis podcast. Maybe we should talk about weed. And we were talking about this idea of like free radicals. And so we were talking about determinism and stuff like this. And it's popped into my head there that I think there are these free radical agents, these individuals within culture and society, youth predominantly, that rebel. And I think it is an inbuilt anthropological and biological imperative. I think that if you imagine us as cavemen huddled around a fire somewhere, and we have a limited gathering ground and we kind of live in this area, it is the youth that then drove forward the advancement that went, oh, what's over that hill? You know what I mean? The old wise matriarch and patriarch sat there like, we don't care. We don't care. There's food here. Yeah, but what's over there? You know, and it's that curiosity that drives us. The curiosity comes from youth, and it's been stolen from us, whether it's through the indoctrination of education or of manufactured religion that is central doctrine focused, that doesn't allow for spiritual individualism within its belief structure. Well,
curiosity, as they say, is what killed the cat. You know, that's kind of what we've been trying to be shaped to be. The way in which we think in society, you know, we had the different kind of reformations happening over the years with the different church, you know, the Lutheran Reformation, which really took away the power from the church at the time. But a lot of the times these guys had vested interests in controlling the masses and the different ways in which to do it. And I definitely think that, again, the prohibition of drugs is just another form of that. I definitely think if we had a wider access to even things like psychedelics there, that would definitely help spark a lot of that curiosity out there, which could lead us to places, wondrous places, you know. Like, isn't Watson and Crick, don't they accredit LSD to the discovery of the double helix structure of DNA? Mm-hmm. Like, yeah, I think that's and credit. I can't recall that there was definitely a lady involved in that discussion. I've seen somebody put an article there that there was some lady. She never gets credit, and I forget her name now. Some terrible, aren't they? Yeah, the two lads at LSD, like, yeah.
But no, you're right. I mean, even somebody like Paul McCartney said LSD was one of the most positive experience of his life. Steve Jobs, even Bill Gates, you know, said you've recently got somebody like Will Smith coming out and talking about ayahuasca. Yeah. But it's interesting, actually, in some of my research a few years ago, one of the earliest examples of mass prohibition from a religious institution that I could find was from the Pope in the 14th century to the church in Ireland about Liberty Cap mushrooms. About the mushrooms that occurred within the grounds of the monasteries.
You must send that to me. I didn't come across it.
It's in a Google. I'm not going to look for it now. It was in a, like, you know, Google Docs where somebody uploads a book. It was a reference that I came across. See if I can dig it out for you. And it was basically stated that the rationale behind it was that the church was to be the only vessel to God.
Yeah.
Was that it was only through the abstinence, through suffering, and through sort of what they call servitude, basically, that you would arrive at enlightenment and access to and so it was quite interesting. And yeah, you do bring up a good point that prohibition, as it would seem, is just a mechanism for social control. Yep. That it's not about fear of the harms of these substances, because otherwise we wouldn't currently have so many patents on novel compounds and analogs based on them for them being therapeutic or having therapeutic.
Why don't
benefit.
we have controls that are regulating people's intake of sugar, let's say? If the government is so hell-bent on protecting us from these dangerous substances out there, you know, like sugar is probably one of the most dangerous ones out there. Why aren't they regulating for that? No, nobody's calling for that, but it's okay. Look, you know, never mind these drug users. I mean, we can kind of overstep there. We can infringe there on public health grounds. So be it. But no, we wouldn't accept it. We would not accept it. Like, if the government came down and said, look, you're only allowed one fizzy drink a week, you know, and they tried to regulate however they might try to regulate it, you know. They don't really care. I think there was a recent article said that the seizures that they make here in Ireland, maximum 10% of the drugs that reach the streets. So they don't care how ineffective their policies are. It's just more about the social control. Like, and if we were to leave it, if we didn't challenge the government on this at the moment, like, would we get to a stage where, like, imagine if you're going down the road and like a public health policy, you know, on obesity, they come out and they're like, the cops jump out of the car and make you stand on the scales and measure your BMI, and if you're in a breach of it, it's like, no, go on down to fat camp there. We don't want you to be leaning on our health services, because that's what they kind of say about us as drug users, illegal drug users. That's a cost to the health system, you know. Yeah. But if a person's like suffering with drug addiction, you know, that's their own affliction. That's self-afflicted, you know. There's actually people out there who believe this kind of way of thinking. Yeah,
but yeah, exactly. If we took it to the hyperbole degree, as you were saying, then obesity, they would say, is self-inflicted. They could say that. I mean, with the researchers coming out, we're not going to go into an argument or discussion here about, say, veganism, for example, but researchers coming out about linking, say, dairy to cancer. We're even talking about, alcohol's relationship to cancer, for fuck's sake. I mean, alcohol kills, according to the World Health Organization, 1 in 20 people. 5% of all deaths ever in the world every year is directly attributed to the consumption of alcohol. Yet we don't apply that same rationale and logic. What we do is we think, we need a campaign to teach people to drink responsibly. We need to regulate the alcohol supply so that it is pure. We know exactly what's in it. There's a consistency and a quality to it. Yeah. And it's the same way as if we were to follow that rationale to public health. All right, then why the fuck are you building new coal plants? Why are we looking at nuclear power? Why are we producing all of this air pollution? Because that is, other than these other factors, the largest contributor towards premature death in the world. Not only just premature death, but neurological development issues, physiological development issues, chronic health issues. We're looking at this wrong, and it's because governments became corporations and they became the same entities, and religion and the state have become an extension of each other. I would
describe them as definitely they've lost their soul, the spirit that was once there. You know, governments. Even if you look at the establishment of the Irish government, the people who did that, these were people who were willing to lay down their lives for the people of the land. And we look at our current government now, and they'd sell their fucking mother, you know, just to get one over on somebody in life. You know, they've lost it. Like we've removed any bit of like shred of life that was once there, you know, the soul that was once existing within these governments when they were formed. No, I don't know about the English government and stuff like that. That's a lot older than the Irish one, but still, even with the establishment of these governments, like the state and the church were always married. The state and the church were always married. And to go back to where you were talking earlier about the establishment of prohibitions, well, even you go back as far back and to go back and tackle alcohol, like that, there was that was all. What were they called? The ladies. It was very women driven as well, because of like how men would treat women.
We think it's suffragettes.
Is it the suffragettes? Yeah, that could have been the ones.
Before, are we on about in America? Like alcohol,
movement, the temperance movement. Yeah. That's the one I was trying to think of. The temperance movement. Again, these is very tied in with the church. You know, it's very much there to control people. Because if you were drunk, you know, you weren't going to be listening to the pastor and stuff like that. You're not going to be listening to the readings of the Bible. You're not going to be tuned in. So that to them was not good. They want you to be tuned in, they want you to be listening, and they want you to be on the hook so they can control you again. And again, you know, and I think there's a liberty caps on your top there. You know, when you consume some of those liberty caps, again, they cease to be able to keep you on that hook, because again, it just opens you up to what the world really potentially is. You know, because when you consume mushrooms and stuff like that, and I know you hallucinate and you see things that potentially aren't there, but the thing about it is the experience is real. Like your experience, the thoughts that go on, like how you perceive things, that experience is still real. And for a lot of people with psychedelics, with mushrooms, like they're very profound, and like a lot of people like say it's like godlike entities that they touch off of and stuff like that. Again, church and state were married, like so you can't help but, like, I suppose, have a conversation about prohibition and not bring the church into this, and this idea that the prohibition is actually just but a tool for the control and the manipulation of the masses, to keep from us something, you know, that is going to offer us, you know, potential answers to questions that we might have that we are currently getting through different means, you know, religion and stuff like that. Because I definitely, like, I look at the Santa Daime religion. I'm very interested in the teachings there and what they kind of go through and stuff like that. But again, within what they all believe is God was within all of us. Like we all have God within us, and that's a very empowering thing. Whereas if you have to go and sit down to the church and you're talking about, you know, that God is external to us, he's a man in the sky watching us, judging us, rather than we are our own judge. We are our own gods. Like we like, and not to be egotistical, like, you know, like once we die, we lose our brand. Like, I'm no longer Martin when I die. I just return to, like, and this is just my belief getting out there, like, just that I return to the ether, I return to the one, and that me and you will be reunited in spirit, and we're like, whoa, what a blast that was. But we'll not retain that identity of who we are. But whereas, like, this religion is the teaching of religion, it's like, you know, no, you will retain your body and your soul when you go up there, you know, and this kind of idea of heaven and stuff like that. You know, it's very disempowering to you right now, right here, the present. This is your heaven. Like, you don't treat this as your heaven. Heaven is on earth right now. Just live life as this is your heaven, and make it just that. Don't be waiting for this eternal ever after. Like, you know, it's like, it's very disempowering to you as an individual. Whereas psychedelics, I think psychedelics are very empowering.
It's interesting because most of the Abrahamic religions were almost built as prisons to their prophets. So Catholicism, Christianity came off the back of, if you wanted then to say, of Jesus. But if you then look at, say, the teachings and of his fucking life of just being like, nah, fuck capitalism. I'm going to hang around with these sex workers. We're going to do all this shit. We're going to take back you know what I mean? If you actually look at the rebellious nature of it, the best way to stop that myth is to encapsulate it in a larger myth. Oh, he came down because he's the son of God. And the reason he did all this stuff was to, and so I think that it's a bastardization. It's a theft of a narrative. And I've spoken this for a while, that I think one of the reasons that we're really struggling in the 21st century collectively, globally, is the lack of modern myths. Is that a lot of people, especially the youth, myself included, and obviously you've mentioned you've obviously already got children. I have zero interest in ever procreating, ever getting married, ever participating in that system. It is just so antithetical to what my spirit is geared towards now, that I feel that there is this separation. If it wasn't for my fight within this, I would be very hedonistic still, I imagine, quite egoic and very much just satisfying my own instantaneous gratification, getting instantaneous gratification, you know, satisfying my own needs and desires and wants, rather than actually having that time to reflect upon myself. And I think that these societal norms, whether they come from religion, come from governments, come from TV and film, you know, mass media, they all encapsulate and steal the myths from us of our own narrative, that exploration of ourselves, of finding God within ourselves. And I think that's something, it took me a lot of LSD experiences to kind of recognize that what I was kind of dealing with and struggling in myself was this idea that I'd experienced a sense of God, but I didn't believe in God. And it really fucked with me for a while, because I was like, no, there's not a man in the sky. There is not a preordained plan. And I really had to spend a long time. Me and one of my friends actually did 200 micrograms of LSD every Sunday for a year. And we'd sat and do spiritual work. So we'd arrange like the room set up, and we'd spend a few hours sort of getting through the high of it, as it were. And then we'd watch documentaries, or we'd read, or we'd learn about various things. And we'd just talk in that mindset of acceptance of like, well, what's this? What's that? And going through that, I arrived at exactly that point that I've then found in a lot of literature of other people that I think have experienced a similar path as me, of kind of being, you know, staunchly quite atheist because of, well, the other shit doesn't make sense, but then actually realizing maybe atheism is in of itself a belief. Therefore, and you kind of get caught up in this, well, what the fuck does any of it mean? And then I arrived at this idea that I generate and create my reality. I cannot prove, if I were to then jump off a bridge and disappear, that all y'all don't disappear. Do you know what I mean? That was one of the things that really screwed me most on one night on LSD, was this idea that when I shut my eyes, it disappears. It wasn't until I watched something by Sadhguru, and he explained like his journey into this, that I kind of recognized this commonality of people within, say, Jainist, Hinduist, or Buddhist beliefs that would use introspection as a way rather than external sort of machinations and workings, you know. And then I kind of went, it is the God within, and actually we have to use the man in the sky as the analogy to say it to the other. Whereas I think moving into a post-prohibition world where psychedelic compounds and entheogenic substances are more prolific, we can just use the experience. So we can then go back to like the tribal first world cultures of like, you give someone a knife and kick them out into the woods and they'd go and have to survive. And in that process, they would actually release naturally sort of theoretically sort of things like DMT, and they would have these profound sensatory opening experiences that would then inform the next few years of their life. And I think that we culturally could encourage that almost with psychedelics, to allow people to kind of go, it's not about leaving the childish pursuits of youth behind, but it's understanding how to retain that curiosity and that intrigue, but operate within the world that is in front of you.
Yeah, and I definitely think there is going to be a resurgence of, there is currently a resurgence of psychedelics going on. There's actually a study going on here in Ireland, and the psychedelics, the therapeutic use of psilocybin mushrooms. They're in the same college, I believe. I was in Trinity. They'd done some research there into the use of ketamine and depression, and there was some promising results found there as well. So there is definitely a resurgence of them. But again, like our earlier conversation with cannabis, money, dudes in suits, like, is like, again, is this going to be co-opted there and put into some pill form and just sold off, you know? And it's been really robbed again of this thing that's lacking in our government at the moment, as we talked about. That's the soul, that's the spirit, that the real meaning behind like the doing of it is, it shouldn't be ever profit driven, you know. It should be always centered, focused on helping people, you know, and not putting it into some patented farm technology, you know, making it inaccessible then and putting barriers in place. It's like, no, it should be, again, another form of community driven kind of a way in which you're doing things anyway. Again, I can't help but thinking the profit there, that it is going to bring in these people who are just going to co-opt it. And quite often or not, that the people who do well in this capitalist model are the people who are willing to step in others to kind of get up above. And that is a flaw of the capitalist model. I'm not anti-capitalist by any means, but it's like I see the flaws within the system, and I'm concerned about that then when it comes to substances like this that we need, when we've had access to for millennia, you know, like we would have had people present within our communities who were referred to as like the shaman, the healing people. And again, I would say like that these people were slowly removed by the church over the years. You know, they were referred to as witches, as like, you know, as these kind of these portrayal of evil people communing with the devil and all of this stuff. How else do they know how the herbs and the things heal people? You know, they're learning from the devil. Don't trust these people. And it's just like, look where we are now today, where we've got these pharmaceutical industries selling us things that we once didn't need. You know, if you had a problem, the answer was probably, the solution was probably growing around you, and there was probably someone in your local community who would have been able to harvest that, process it, and provide it for you. You know, and those people are no longer there. They're almost seen as like the alternative. They're jujus, almost like voodoo doll or voodoo fucking kind of people. Whereas your doctor in his white coat, like, he's the guy. Don't trust him, and he's drugged with 101 side effects.
Yeah, well, it's interesting, yeah, because those doctors in their robes, in their garbs, in the pageantry that is created by it, that is the new religion. You put your faith in science, you put your faith in modern medicine, yet they create maintenance drugs, not solutions. So you then get ill with something, they then go, oh, you've suddenly developed adult onset diabetes, right? Okay, we can now sell you insulin every month for the rest of your life, or we can have a conversation about what the hell is going on with your diet.
Yes.
Do you know what I mean? So there was a backwards thing, and it's interesting. One of the things that went off in my head, actually 2 points that went off in my head there. One is, religion did that for 1,000+ years in many different guises, until we arrive at the 20th century, or the start of the 20th century, and basically three great intellectuals, or arguably great intellectuals, in Jung, Adler, and Freud, start coming up with what became modern psychoanalytics. And then we have pathologized the healers, the alternatives, the weirdos, the wackos, the beautiful souls in our society for the past century. We said, oh, you're demonic, you've got depression, that's a personality disorder. Do you know what I mean? Some of these things do help, and they help us understand mechanisms within neurology and within our behavior. but then given the keys of that to this system that then goes, aha, sweet, let's not help them, but let's give them a pill every day for the rest of their life. Ka-ching, we're cash in. Whereas now they've gone, oh shit, they're healing themselves. They're going away to festivals and taking MDMA and ketamine, getting off the fucking face and talking about their childhood traumas and going home on a Monday and they're fine. Oh, no, I can't have this. So yeah, they're co-opting, as you say, in London right now and in Bristol, I think, as well as the second clinic. For $6,000, you can have a ketamine-infused treatment. And what they're doing is, to me, it feels like they're sanitizing it. They're preventing the profound. They're preventing you having this revelatory, wild experience. You are in this homogenized, hygienic, or standardized room that, yeah, they've maybe stolen some iconography from of like geometric patterns and things that people sort of see traditionally on different compounds, or say deities like the Buddha, etc., calming influences in music, etc. They're still not, they're over controlling the experience. And I think that the research and what's coming out now from a lot of the pharmaceutical companies is fucking terrifying. Yeah. They're trying to use psilocybin. So they take psilocybin in magic mushrooms. Mm-hmm. Our bodies break that down into psilocybin. They've created analogs of psilocybin, but what they're trying to do is make it so there is no high. So basically what my brain is saying is that, okay, if they then make it so there's no high, they then get onto microdosing. What's the microdosing version of this? They then create an analog of this, they put it into a pill, boom, there's a maintenance drug for you for the rest of your fucking life. Yeah. Whereas what we should actually be doing is culturally, what I'm about to do over the next couple of weeks, as I alluded to earlier, the light change because I live in the north, the weather change, everything else, it's affecting me physiologically. Okay, yeah. So I'm going to go with my missus and we're going to take a large dose of mushrooms to help with that, to help with my neurology, to help, because we know what it does for neurogenesis, we know what it does for helping neuroplasticity and creating new novel thoughts, and to have that profound impact rather than going into this pathologizing thing of going, oh, well, I must be depressed and whatever else. No, it's seasonal changes in the same way that we all suddenly start, oh, let's have soup. It's soup weather because it's cold. That's what we should be treating these things as. That actually, if we remove this sensationalist thing of drugs, and yeah, we put over here dependency issues, which is still the minority, the vast minority of all consumers. You look at the global drug survey, it averages out to about 10 to 12% of people that consume all substances have a dependency issue. So that means the vast majority of people are already regulating and controlling their consumption. And if we then pathologize that and force them into this, oh no, you have to come to this clinic and sign this on and give us this data, and it loses then the special relationship to it. Like I said, the reason that those mushrooms are probably going to be so useful and helpful leading into winter for me and my partner is the psychedelic experience. It is that giggling till our stomachs hurt, till my jaw hurts from smiling so much. It is from the bonding, the hormonal release of that connection, of that experience. It is then the memory of that moving forward in weeks and months to come that will then warm my spirit. Literally, we're potentially going to miss and skirt over the largest potential that these compounds have, which is for the revelatory experience of self, true ego dissolution, and the humbling of spirit. The recognition that I came to after that year of LSD, I know fucking nothing, literally nothing. I can learn something like, yeah, yes, I've got it, and acquire it, and I can maybe even go champion that idea, but then I'll learn something else, or I'll recognize someone else, or something else is revealed to me, and that's gone again. There is no relative truth. There is no reality. You know what I mean? It manifests through our experience of ourselves as God in this multi-deity occupied dimensional universe.
Yeah, well, I can't imagine what it's like to do weekly doses of LSD. I can count on one hand my experiences with LSD, and I'm telling you that there was one night with a Pink Floyd album, the bloody documentary kind of version of it, not the documentary, the videography version of it, like. Man, I swear I thought I was in there. Like, you know, there was like a hidden message, and I was saying to my buddy afterwards, I was just like, was that guy talking to you as well? Like, were you getting the same message as me? And it was just like, what? And then what's going on? But it was the next day after it. I'll never forget my buddy saying it to me. This was our second time doing LSD. And he goes, just looking at the trees, they look just so much more beautiful today. He's just like, you know, it's like being a child again, is how he described it. He goes, everything is just so much more exciting now. You know, it's like to see it. It brings more joy to him to just be present in the world. That's kind of it. Like he was like that. That's how I would take what he was saying. It was just like, it was joyous to be present in the world, to be looking at the tree blowing in the wind there. It was like really joyous. It was something that he didn't have the day before, you know, he wouldn't, like, he would have got into his car, drove away, and not even looked at the tree blowing in the, but he took a moment to appreciate it. And it's like, that's what psychedelics do to us. Like, they allow us to be grounded, to bring us back. And again, just to be in touch with those things, because if you've got problems going on, you know, maybe the psychedelics would allow you to actually touch off of them. You wouldn't be looking at the tree because you'll be addressing something that needs to be addressed.
Yeah. And I did the Victoria Derbyshire show. Used to be on BBC Two here in the UK. We did a documentary, and I had the crew up here, literally sat in this room for 4 hours, me, Catherine Nye, and this camera guy. And so they tactfully sort of went, you know, if you want to take your microdose now, because obviously they couldn't say take drugs so we can film you taking drugs. Went through the whole process with them, and then I got invited down to the studio and sat there. The only thing that came to my mind was a positive hangover. That is what the reason that I was taking that LSD every Sunday was for every Monday, was for that feeling of waking up with childlike wonder, with this, like, my cells were buzzing with curious excitement of, I get a whole new day. Wow, you know, I can do anything. I can get a bus, I can get a train, I get a plane, I go. It was limitless. That feeling of endless potential within the day was unbelievable. And to then be able to process and sort of interpret and go through what I'd experienced the previous day over that week would then really profoundly change me. I started really reading again. I started watching things that I wouldn't normally watch, just being curious of, like, why did I not want to watch that? Let's have a look. Do you know what I mean? Being actually really curious of my own prejudices, my own bias. And I think that it reawoke within me a childlike curiosity that is still here today. I still feel the need every now and then to touch base with it and to reconnect through the consumption of psychedelic substances. But ultimately, yeah, there is this sense that I think the same reason that we lean into religion, or we lean hard into authoritarianism, the trust in something else, something's got this. And I think that what I kind of got from this was that I've got this. The child in me that's anxious, that's scared, that's unknown, was then reconnected with the adult in me that's lived all of my experience, that's healed from the trauma, that's slept in those dark rooms, that's faced the monsters, that's faced my abusers, that's been in those difficult situations, that stood on stages, that's traveled thousands of miles, that's done all these amazing things, you know what I mean? And have that reconnection and that centralization of self is, grounding, powerfully grounding. And it can be obtained through practices like yoga and meditation, and through disciplines like sort of sports or martial arts training, you know, those kind of things. I don't kind of care how we arrive to it, but I think the fact that we can is vitally important, that we talk far more about it.
Yeah, big time. And I think something that you mentioned a while ago about the kind of the altering of the psilocybin there to take the high out of it. Like these people, like, you know, you mentioned the exercise and stuff like that, you know, there is a real disconnection between the mind and the body in modern medicine at the moment, you know, like people are depressed, here's a pill. But meanwhile, like if you go for a run, like exerting that exercise there, like, you know, while you're on that run, you might be dealing with things mentally there, you know, and that there's compounds being released within your body that are adding to the therapy, that are helping alleviate maybe to work out something that might be, you know, might have been something he said, or it could be any kind of thing. But like there's a real disconnect there between in modern medicine about like the mind body, the whole spirit connection there, and I think that's something that they're missing then when they're trying to do things like that, take the high out of it. But like in the high, because you encounter challenges like within the like psychedelics are it's not all fucking rainbows and sunshine and stuff like that. You know, you encounter some challenging things, but within the challenge, I love a challenging like. I go exercise, like I love to do long runs, endurance and stuff like that. There's something about overcoming a challenge and challenging yourself. It's really beneficial, and it's refreshing to be able to do that. And I think that's the very same with what people might describe as a bad trip. It's like, but no, when you take again psychedelics, it's all about the setting, which you kind of talked about as well earlier. But the mindset, like that's a hell of an important thing, you know, as well as a safe setting and environment around you and stuff like that. But the mindset, you know, that's very important when it comes to the psychedelics, and the psychedelics will know if you need to be kind of maybe challenged on certain things. And sometimes for people, you know, if they're not up to the challenge, you know, that they might kind of have a bit of a breakdown. But you always have to be prepared for that with psychedelics, you know, for the challenging encounters. Just be aware of who you are, and that's very important as well. And that's something that I probably was maybe having problems with myself with psychedelics. I was always afraid of maybe what demons I might encounter there, and maybe I might just fucking shy away from this path of activism or something like that. But I'm definitely long overdue a visit there, or a reset anyway. My psychedelic of choice. But what I do definitely like psilocybin and the LSD. Mine was definitely DMT. It was my first major psychedelic that I tried, and it alleviated my anxiety. I suffer with insomnia at night time. I used to have fierce anxiety with the thought, the aspect of death, especially after the birth of my first child. I used to always wonder, you know, if I die and I go to heaven, you know, this kind of a Christian belief, you know, that you're going to be up there in the clouds and joined by friends and family, you know. It's just like, what if my daughter, you know, doesn't live the life, you know, that God, Jesus approves of, and sends her to hell or something? What if I'm sent to hell and they're up in heaven? And it's just like, how are they ever going to be happy? How am I ever going to be happy without them? It's just like, you know, and I used to just like have knots in my stomach at night time, like fierce problems. Like, I used to be running rings around in my head. And I researched DMT for about a year and a bit. I had one hit, smoked it in a bowl from the bong with in a sandwich of Candy Kush. It was a buddy had grown. It was beautiful, lovely taste actually. And you'd be kind of thinking, you know, with DMT, I don't know if you've smoked it, it like fucking tastes like plastic. But that was a very pleasant experience. That first time I tasted, very sweet going down, but you could smell the plastic in the air afterwards of the smoked DMT. But that one dose, breakthrough dose, and alleviated like my insomnia there at night time. I've not once ever sat down or lay in bed just pondering about like the afterlife. I'm at peace with it now, and that's what psychedelics offered in my life. And cannabis too. My experience with cannabis has been incredibly beneficial. So once the fight for cannabis is won here, I'm going to continue to champion on and fight on for the access to these wider substances too. You know, the mushrooms and the others, because they need to be researched. They don't need to be patented and reshaped and reformed. You know, if you believe in the Bible and stuff, man, God done his work well in this one, and he created these things as they should be, and we shouldn't really try to be playing God on these aspects. You know, there's certain places, you know, where there's room for that, but others, you know, it's like, no, let it be. It's kind of perfect as it is.
Yeah. No, you raised some interesting points there. Yeah, I'm fortunate to have probably 100 plus DMT sort of experiences, and
100 plus. Wow.
I spent a lot, dude. So I had a very difficult sort of childhood. Meant I was sort of removed from mainstream education, suffered a lot of abuse as a kid, very violent and destructive sort of upbringing. And this led to very self-destructive teenage years, a lot of alcohol, every drug and possible reach that I could get my hands on, just as a constant form of escapism. And then it was sort of into my 20s that I recognized that some of them were really fucking helping. Like, some points I would be living amazing, and it would only then be the state of my life that would bring me down again. And then I'd fall into the same patterns, and then would kind of almost have these clarity, moments of clarity through psychedelic experiences of then going, why am I still destroying myself? I'm not facing the same trauma anymore. I'm not in the same situations. I'm capable of change. I'm capable of growth. And yeah, I found in DMT, I think I can't remember who described it, but they said that the process of ego death almost answers the unanswerable question. So even though we can't explain it to each other, no matter how hard we try, after that we come back and we kind of go, and it just falls apart in front of you. It's there in you, but we don't have the language. It doesn't exist because it's not meant to be given to each other. It's like what Morpheus says when Neo walks out of the oracle, and he goes, what was said was for you. Do you know what I mean? And so I think that then having that kind of experience and answering that question settles something deep in us, something so primordial that we go, it doesn't matter. I don't kind of care. I don't need to answer that question right now. I can think about it every now and then, and even enjoy. Like I found a lot of people that then had that experience can pontificate for hours and have these podcasts, these conversations about it, and not raise a tingle in them because they've got this certainty that it doesn't matter because they've touched it. They've touched enough of it. And whether it then manifests to people as greys or as all of their relatives and their ancestors or as whatever sort of experience. And I've had experience where I've literally felt lifted, cocooned. So I smoked one night in bed to try literally to deal with sort of sleep. And I cried, literally just was crying in a ball. And I felt this warmth of just entities. It was almost like everyone's ever loved me, just cuddling me, of just this ultimate radiant warmth. And then I've had DMT experiences where I've had like slip, and I've had two experiences on top of each other where it's one's like slightly out of sync and the screen's slightly off. And it's playing back to each other. I've had experiences in almost like time travel where I think I've spoken this on the podcast before, and I went back to the first guy that gave me DMT in a public setting, and I could hear the conversation. I actually remembered then the guy that I was sat with, reached out to him on Facebook, and I was like, do you remember this experience? I've literally just sat, and it was like I was there kind of hovering. It's been such a wide birth of different
there's somebody that you just reminded me of there, and I don't know if you've ever come across him. He's since bloody left this earth. I think he passed away actually because of COVID, unfortunately. Kilindi, big strong looking black guy. But I first came across him when he was talking about how mushrooms were not even like he was kind of like laughing at Terence McKenna, what he refers to as a heroic dose in this talk that he gives. But he was like on about, in the ritualistic way of using these mushrooms, like we'd be far exceeding like what would be regarded as a heroic dose today. He talks about like 20 gram plus mushroom trips. That's where you want to be bringing it to really break the veil, to really get that vivid interaction, and to like to overcome what you kind of like brought up with, even with DMT, is like this kind of a state of confusion that can be there sometimes, or the loss of the grasp of what was being given to you through the experience. That he talks about that the doses that we're kind of referring to as heroic doses are actually not there at all. But he brought up a very interesting thing in his talk. There was another talk he gave, and it was about these mosaic carpets. I don't know, Jake, if you know those kind of carpets and they have all these intricate designs and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. But he talks about those being actually designed and handed down through families, like for generations. And what these carpets would retain then would have been your ancestors. You would sit on these carpets, you would consume a psychedelic, an hallucinogen of some kind, and then you would go commune with your ancestors. Like much like you could go and you could revisit that conversation there. Obviously you were present, so you have memory of it. He was claiming, through this lost art of like communing with your past generations. We used to be able to do that through the use of these carpets and stuff like that. I know, again, magic carpets, you look at Aladdin and stuff like that. Are these things that have been like robbed from us? Mm-hmm. The idea of a magic carpet, it wasn't actually a flying carpet. It was a carpet that you sit on and you consume the thing and you went flying into it. And you travel to like, and he talks about it. He's like, this corner would be like this far back a generation. This would be, and that you would add your piece to it then as you would hand it down to the future generations, and that you too, your spirit would be encapsulated in that. And again, like, I'm only just kind of re-saying what he does. Like for me, it's like, it's a hard thing to conceive that. It's like, how is that even possible? But it's like, at the same time, when you do DMT, it's just like, fucking, how is that possible?
It does kind of make sense though, if we understand like totems, and their importance throughout the entirety of, let's call it, conscious humanity. Mm-hmm.
Why was there ever a place of worship? Why would we return to a place? There was an idea that, like, I think, there's a guy talks about it, resonance theory, that these inanimate objects, they retain a spirit, a memory of things like that. He's a famed kind of guy anyway, talks about resonance theory. His name might come in a mile.
Rupert Sheldrake.
Rupert Sheldrake, yeah, I knew it was one more. Rupert Sheldrake, yeah.
Yeah.
So again, this resonance theory, this isn't like a new idea at all. Like, this is something that's been there. We've had totems, places of worship, because we believe that they retain the spirit and knowledge.
We can actually use, I suppose, modern language to kind of describe this. If we think of a totem as something in like augmented reality, So if I look at this lighter, for example, I don't know why we're always getting bear plug in this fucking. Gonna have to get them on the podcast. But yeah, when I then look at this, I don't think of where it came from. You know what I mean? My association to it. So it doesn't hold in it a memory, but when I look at it, it brings about that memory in me. So I think that then, we create iconography and totems and objects and heirlooms, as it were, things that we hand down that we put into them something, but not in a physical sense. So in the same way that I have a bone, and probably everyone of my generation will, a bone handled butter knife from my grandmother. And every time it comes out of the cutlery drawer and I use it,
remember your grandma?
But not only do I remember her, something in me feels good. I feel how she viewed me. Is no matter how much I fucked up in my life, no matter how much interactions with the police or social services or whatever crap was going on, she would talk to me like she loved me, she cared about me, and she accepted me. And so in that knife, that feeling exists. So that association, those memories. So I think that there is something to that. And we could use Rupert Sheldrake's sort of morphic resonance ideas and concepts like that. I mean, we could then look at, there's a project in America called Heart Maps, and they discovered like resonance of the human heartbeat synchronized in the same way like women's menses cycle. So you could extrapolate from that there's then our resonance could then affect inanimate objects and change it's called the frequency. It ends up sounding spiritual, but it's actually in physics in terms of the resonance of the object. So therefore it can affect it. We could perceive it on a subconscious level. You know what I mean? Just because we can't, as Huxley says, our perception of field is limited to what is necessary for evolution. Yet the psychedelic experience just opens that fucking valve. And so we have all of these floods of colors that we can't quite describe. You know, people suffer synesthesia quite often with psychedelic compounds where they smell sounds or they hear things that they see and get this weird commingling of neurons up in the brain. I think that alludes to this same sort of thing, that there is a hell of a lot more going on there than we're privy to. And I think that we understood that in previous cultures, that instead of building these great temples and monoliths and these ideas of places that's where God is, we just lived humbly in cultures where we celebrated the God in each other, that we recognized humbly. You look at a lot of the old world cultures, they were matriarchies, not patriarchies, because they were led through love and compassion, connection. It was about everybody being served. You know, there's a Christian writer that speaks of this, Tom Hartman, has a wonderful narrative on it. And he speaks of, so the lie that we've been sold is that if you are cold, naked, and alone in the woods, you are in a distressed state. If somebody comes and offers you fire, shelter, some clothing, and some food, you're in a fucking good state. You've gone from zero to very happy very quickly. The lie that capitalism in the modern world has sold us on is that if X amount makes you X amount happy, more will make you happier. And we've ended up being sold this lie of this myth that it's always the next thing, the next object, this predestination fixation, that the next thing is what's going to make you happy, when it's actually the pausing and the reflecting and that looking inward. And I think that when we're not buying unconsciously to have these totems around us because, I've got this because they've got it, or this is the latest thing, say when everybody suddenly had silver and gold pineapples in their houses because it was just what we do now, apparently, people would have an object that's then valuable to them. So like, I don't know, that was a gift from my girlfriend. You know, I traded this at a festival for a guy that hand carved it. I try to only own objects that have meaning and purpose deliberately when I look at them. That's from, I went to weed in California, and that every time I look at that, I remember driving to the place and literally the smile on my face, going, I'm in weed, I'm going to go smoke some weed and weed. And that whole fucking day of it, do you know what I mean? And I'm not trying to pacify something in myself. I'm trying to put it into the external world, parts of myself, so that others can look at that and go, oh, so what's this? And I can express myself through that object rather than it representing something of me. It holds something. And I think that the more cannabis proliferates, the more entheogenic compounds proliferate, the closer we get to the acceptance and awareness that we are as much spiritual beings as we are physical beings. We're as much emotional beings as we are fucking workers, you know what I mean? But we need to operate and have purpose within life and meaning. But if we don't have a myth, a narrative, a fable, a story within ourselves, and I most of the stories that I have that motivate me are weird things. Like fucking one of my idols is like Fox Mulder from the X-Files, for example. You know what I mean? That rebellion against authority, but working within that system to try and figure out that truth of then questioning his own beliefs and challenging when new evidence is based. You know what I mean? If the kind of people that I develop from modern media, whereas I feel that modern age, we're kind of seeing, this renaissance of psychedelics now impacting modern media, but there's still the steadfast say of sitcoms and of soaps and of shit like that just regurgitate and proliferate that same status quo that we were talking about before from the state or from corporations or from the religious institutions.
Yeah, no. I'm just conscious of time there as well. Sorry to kill the conversation. I've 5 minutes. I have to go and collect my daughter there actually at 20 past 2. It's been fucking great chatting, and I'm gutted now that I have to kill the conversation here because I'm really enjoying where it was kind of going and around psychedelics and things like that.
Well, then can I pitch you an idea that I spoke of with Connor? So recognized a funny joke the other day. You're an Irishman. Yeah. Connor's a Scotsman. I'm an Englishman. I think the three of us should get together and because we literally ended up talking about similar topics. So I think the three of us on those sorts of topics would make a very interesting series of podcasts if you'd be up for it, man.
Yeah, definitely. We'll have to change our name to Paddy, all of us. We'll be 3 Paddies then. Paddy Irishman, Englishman, and Paddy Scotsman.
Love it. Man, I'll let you shoot. I'll continue for 5 chatting to these fine folks at home. But yeah, honestly, Martin, thank you for making the time. I've thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. We'll have to continue it again sometime soon.
Yeah, no problem, Ron. I'll keep you in the loop of stuff that's going on. But if anybody wants to keep in the loop on it, it's Martin's World Podcast. You'll find me on YouTube, Twitter, Twitch, and Facebook as well. So I go live every Monday, Wednesday, Friday. I do a news segment at 4:20. So an important time there to the community. So it's a good fun one too. We normally kind of shoot the breeze then for a bit afterwards. It's not all news. Try to get some positive stuff out there as well. But that's where you'll kind of catch me and be keeping up to date there on anything that's going on here in Ireland anyway, at least. And we do try to go international with the news there as well. So we cover stuff from further afield as well. Always looking over to see how the fight is going for other people because, we're all in this together.
Yeah, excellent. I will include the links in the bio below, folks. Do check out Martin's World Podcast. Keep up to date with everything Irish and 420, and hopefully we will see the Emerald Isle Green be represented by Cannabis in the near future.
By that flag. Thanks again, Simpa. Enjoy the rest of your afternoon.
Peace and love, brother. Peace. Take it easy. Pleasure talking to Martin from Martin's World Podcast there. Do check him out on Twitch and YouTube every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 4:20. Perfect time to catch up on all the news from Ireland and internationally. If you enjoyed this podcast and if you want to see a Englishman, Irishman, and Scotsman podcast, do let us know in the comments below. Do like, share, subscribe, and all the usual good things wherever you are on this wonderful wide web of ours. I've been Simpa Carter. You've been wonderful. Please do check us out on patreon.com/Simpa Life, where you can help keep the lights on this little project of mine for less than a cup of coffee a month. Check us out on all social media platforms at The Simpa Life, and check out thesimpalife.com for exclusive blogs and content. And I will be revamping very soon. All right. Peace and love, folks. See you soon. Condon.
Yeah.
Condon. All right. My brain is trying so hard to not say like condom.
Condom.
Yeah.